My name is William R. Reid. R stands for Reid Rollins.
Okay, and where were you born at?
Charlotte.
Okay. And when were you born?
Born in 1934.
What day?
May the 12th.
May the 12th, 1934. Now, tell us about growing up. Tell us about your family and growing up.
I grew up in a very loving family. My father was a owner of a restaurant, and my mother helped him, and had a brother and a sister. They both are deceased, and that's about all I can tell you about my family.
So, did you go to school, public schools in
Yes.
Charlotte?
I went to several schools. I went to Villa Heights primary school, elementary school. I went to Midwood. Then I went to Piedmont Junior High, and then I went to Central High, which is now Central Piedmont Community College.
Oh my gosh. When did you first get interested in media, in broadcasting?
I used to call the radio station. There was a radio station called WAYS, and they had a record show on at night, and all the kids in town called and had records.
Requests.
Right.
Yeah.
And I used to call and have a song played for me and my best friend. His name was Johnny, and the two twins, Emmy Lou and Maggie Lou Wimple. And there were no such people as that. And everybody at school wanted to know who they were.
What song did you ask for?
Pardon me?
What song did you ask for?
I don't remember.
No.
I don't remember.
But you had these, you requested in names and...
And the guy who was answering the phone, we got acquainted. He said, I've got to go to junior senior prom. Would you like to come answer the phone?
Wow.
And I said, yes. How much do I have to pay you? He said, no, we'll pay you.
Wow.
Because I thought it was a very interesting thing to be there doing what he was doing.
So the first job you had in media was answering the phone, a telephone operator at WAYS radio in Charlotte, and it sounds like you were about 15 at that time.
15, 16.
Yeah.
I rode the last bus home when we signed off.
Wow. Wow. Well, that was just the beginning of other jobs at WAYS. You then became a control operator. What did you do as a control operator at the station?
Back then, they had a control operator and an announcer. Today, the announcer runs his own controls.
Right.
But back then, I was a control operator.
Great.
And the way I became an announcer is that one of the afternoon men never showed up. He was a drunk, and he didn't show up. And
They needed somebody.
they needed somebody, and the program director taped everything and had me run the tapes until they found somebody. And they looked and couldn't find anybody. Finally, the program director said, get in the studio and read the news and let me hear what you sound like. And he said, you'll do fine till we find somebody. They never did find anybody.
And you were 17 at that time.
That's correct. That's correct.
And you continued on for 3-4 years.
That's correct.
And then another opportunity came up. This time had to do with them getting a television license.
Right.
WASY Radio had WAYS TV, whose call letters became WQMC, Channel 36 in Charlotte.
That is correct.
And what job did you have there?
I started out helping them move some of the equipment from the radio station out to the TV station.
New facility.
Yeah, and I helped the engineer, and then it was a 2-man operation. We ran the test pattern a lot, and had Howdy Doody on and several other programs.
Wow.
And I was the general manager.
Wow. What a jump. You went from radio into television, and that's when television was in its infancy.
Exactly right.
Because in 1949, WBT went on the air, and then just 5 years later, this station went on the air, WQMC. So television was in its heyday, and really in Charlotte, it was very popular and ramping up.
Absolutely.
Wow. Well, but that wasn't the end. You were working. You went into the service and into the United States Air Force, and your interest in broadcasting continued. Talk a little bit about that. When you go in the service, they give you a battery of tests to see what you're good at.
Right.
Talk about that.
I went to what they call career counseling, and they go over your test scores.
In the United States Air Force.
Right. And I was at Chanute Air Force Base in Rantoul, Illinois.
Wow.
I was married at the time, and I lived off base, and I went to school there for weather. The way I got into weather is that I wanted to get into Armed Forces Radio, and there was not an opening.
No openings. Yeah.
They said it'd be about 6 months before an opening would come available, and I would be redlined there. I said, "What does that mean?" He said, "You'll be cutting grass and doing odd jobs around here, KP and so forth and so on." And I said, I got to go home. I'm getting married." So he looked at the scores again and said, "We have an opening in weather. We'll send you to weather school." I said, "Okay, that sounds good."
Now, by an opening in weather, did you do weather forecasts as a broadcaster, or did you just do weather for the Air Force?
I just did weather for the Air Force, but they had a reason to do a 30-minute something similar to what you're doing here, talking about the weather school and so forth, and they chose me to be the narrator.
The on-air person, yeah.
Yeah, and
Wow.
and that helped me get promoted too.
So you spent your entire 4 years in the Air Force working in media and the weather.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great. So in 1959, you got out of the Air Force and you went back to Charlotte. What happened?
I went back to Charlotte, and I was wanted to get back in radio. I went to WSOC and took an audition, and they said, "You're not good enough for us. You've been away from it too long." So I kept looking, and I finally went back to where I came from, WAYS, and when I was interviewing for the job, he was telling me he didn't have an opening and so forth, but the general manager of the company, Jim Poston, who was just the manager of Ways when I went into service, had become the general manager of the group, or president of the group, and he told the manager to hire me.
Wow. So he knew you from before.
Yes.
Knew what a quality person you were.
Yes, he knew me.
And he saw you as he walked past and you were in there interviewing.
Right.
And he came in the room.
Yes, he did.
What did he say to you?
He said, "Hello, are you on home on leave?" Because I used to go by there, because when I was on leave, and he said, I said, "No, I'm out. I'm looking for a job." And he said, "Well, Howard, go ahead and hire him. This kid's a good kid." And the manager did not want to hire me because they didn't have an opening, didn't have a budget for it. And he pointed that out to Jim, his manager, his guy he reported to, and he said, I said, "Hire him." And the guy said, I just don't have a budget. Don't remember we talked about it. He said, I told you to hire him. And he hired me.
Great.
And I stayed there about 2 or 3 months. And he made it tough on me because every time I'd make a mistake, he would raise Cain.
Oh.
So I'd had enough of that. So I went home and started looking around, and that's when I went to see Bob Hilker at WCGC in Belmont.
That was a life-changing friendship.
Absolutely, it was the best move I had ever made.
And the station you went to was his station in Belmont, WCGC.
Correct.
What did you do there?
I was an announcer salesman. I had never sold radio time. I had the morning shift for radio from 7 till 12 noon.
Wow. And then you sold in the afternoon.
Yeah, sold in the afternoon.
And that was a pretty common thing in those days. You had a lot of on-air people that also sold time.
That is correct.
It was true not only in stations with non-owners, but owners did that too. If it was a one station, something that has gone by with years of changes in radio.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And you were at WCGC from 1959 to 1961. Tell us what happened then.
In 1961, well, when I was hired, Bob Hilker hired me without an audition.
Wow.
He just said, "You'll do fine. I've heard about you."
Bob saw that you had future in the company.
Yeah, he said, if you work out, you can go to Valdez and manage our Valdez station.
So in Valdez, they had WSYM in Valdez, North Carolina.
WSVM.
Yes. And you were offered an opportunity to go there as the manager.
Right.
Which you did.
Yes.
Wow. Well, you were there a couple of years. Tell us a little bit about that. How did your roles change, and how did your duties change, and why did you like that?
Well, I became a manager, and even as the manager, I continued to sell time, in part time.
Yeah.
And if I figured real quick that if I wanted to sell time, I'd better not go into the office. I'd just go straight from home and start selling and do my manager's duty in the afternoon, because if I'd go to the office, I'd get stuck in the office and wouldn't get to hit the streets.
Mm-hmm. Now, something else happened while you were the manager there. You got involved in the things that manage radio stations from a regulatory standpoint. You became in what happened in Washington.
Oh.
And you were made part of that team. You went to Washington, D.C. with the owners,
Yeah.
and met with members of Congress and with the FCC. Talk a little bit about that.
It was Bob Hilker, he had a partner, Jim Keel, and myself, and we went calling on Congress, and Jim Keel passed away while we were up there.
Oh my gosh. He died during the trip.
Right. And on the way back, my wife was sitting with his wife, consoling her. And
this was 1965.
yes, I think it was 1965.
And you were sitting with the other owner.
I was sitting with Bob Hilker, and he said, "Now, Bill, I want you to take over Jim Keel's stock." I was already a vice president in the company, and he said, "I want you to become executive vice president and take over Jim's position. And we got to make some fast moves because Jim was managing a station also."
And the name of the company was Suburban Radio Group.
Right.
And those were their stations. How many stations did you have?
At that time, I think we had about 14 or 15.
You're pretty good size
and
for Radio Group in that time.
we kept adding other stations while I was there.
What an opportunity to go from managing a station to have an opportunity to become an owner, part owner
Yeah.
of an established group. And that's when things really started to take off for you.
Yeah.
Wow. And you added stations all along the way.
Yeah, I walked into work one day and Bob Hilker said, I'm thinking about us buying a station in St. Croix, the Virgin Islands.
Wow.
And I said, okay. He said, I want you to go down there and finish the deal. I've already talked to the owners and the manager. So me and Mark Prack went to...
An attorney with the Brooks Pierce.
Right, yeah.
Yep.
Mark Prack, we went to St. Croix and finished that deal.
Wow.
Mark Prack was a very good friend, and he did a lot of work for us.
You know, Bill, one of the things that we'll talk more about, but one of the great contributions that you have made and make have been your engagement with trying to make the regulatory process and the governmental process fair for broadcasters, for small market radio broadcasters and others. And interestingly, you were on a trip on a lobbying trip talking about those issues when, in fact, unfortunately, one of the partners in the group that you came to own passed away, and you got an opportunity to be an owner. But you also became involved about that time with the North Carolina Association of Broadcasters.
And also later on the National Association of Broadcasters.
NAB. But I believe you got on the board of directors in 1969, and which was along this same time. And that's where you really got a lot of knowledge and exposure to the regulatory process and all the things that are required to be a licensee of a radio or television station. Talk a little bit about your involvement with NCAB and how that guided you through the rest of your days.
Well, the NCAB, and I assume it's the same way today, was an association that all the stations belonged to in North Carolina, and they had different programs at the conventions that that they set up to help you hone your skills, whether you be a manager or a copywriter or an engineer or whatever. And when I was president of the Broadcasters Association later on, I made sure that we kept that in place.
You did a lot more than that. You were a strong proponent of a group that, while NCAB provided one voice, which was great, in the state for broadcasters to speak with, because typically the owners and the managers belonged, you were a strong proponent that we need to extend the educational opportunities, not just for managers, but for copywriters, for traffic people. You're the person that really pushed that envelope and said, we have to be more inclusionary so that we help to bring people up through the business so that they know their jobs better, and we bring broadcasters into the fold.
That's very true, yes.
You're the guy responsible for that. You did something else that I was not aware of that I think is great, that has become a staple and a great public service that NCAB does, is that you were the person that said we need to broadcast the North Carolina senatorial debates. And that was you, Bill Rollins.
Yes, that was new for we had to set up a network of stations, and we had the first senatorial debate.
Wow.
I think they're still doing it, but I'm not sure.
Absolutely. It is must-see television. And what a public service to be able to hear our senatorial candidates debate. And when you started it, it was at a time when that wasn't being done.
No, it was.
And by doing it through the organization, it could have statewide coverage rather than a Raleigh station doing it or a Charlotte station, which meant the entire state could hear what the candidates had to say. That's pretty remarkable.
Well, it was well received.
Well, I think so too.
Television does it now.
Yeah. We're going to talk for a minute here also about the the National Association of Broadcasters and some of the things that you did, Bill. But I think there's one other thing that I read that I think was very interesting, and that is when you finished your term as president, you presented every member of the association a copy of a membership jingle.
Yeah, yep, that's exactly right. I had a jingle made for the NCAB, North Carolina Association of Broadcasters. It said that they said we are a member of this station is a proud member of the NCAB, serving blah 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 blah.
What a nice thing to do. How did you decide to do that?
I had a friend that worked for the jingle company, and told him what I wanted to do, and he said, "Oh, we can do that," and it was nominal charge.
You did that at your expense.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
And it made I forget how many copies we made.
Well, that was a nice goodbye gift.
Yeah.
But it wasn't goodbye. You were just getting started, and you were NCAB president in 1974. But your experience with NCAB, you continued on the board of. Well, you were on the board for a period, but then you got involved with the National Association of Broadcasters. How did that come about?
Let me tell you one thing before we talk about that. When I ran for president of the Broadcasters Association,
You ran twice, didn't you?
Yeah.
Let's talk. Tell that story. They were elections, so people were nominated,
and it was
this is 1973.
Me and Bob Harper.
Yes.
Were running, and they took a vote, and it was a tie.
Dead tie.
They said, let's talk about this. They took another vote. It was a dead tie.
Oh my gosh.
So, and then they said, all right, we're going to do this one more time. Well, somebody went to the bathroom because Harper won by one vote. And it's funny, but it really is true. The next year I ran, and I became president.
So in 1973, you lost by one vote because somebody stepped out of the room.
Yeah.
And then in 1974, and gosh, what do you do when you got two great candidates?
Yeah.
It's really tough.
Yeah, yeah.
And we're so glad that you did. Great contributions, educating people, changing really the focus of NCAB to say, we have to not only educate and be a spokesperson, a single voice for broadcasters and managers, we also have to reach down to the ranks. And the senatorial debate, that's just a visionary thing that continues today and helps. Let's go now to the National Association of Broadcasters. Gosh, you did a lot. Let's talk about how you got interested. You were with the Small Market Committee.
Yeah, well, the National Association of Broadcasters has directors that come from all over the state and
country, all over the country.
Yeah, all over the country, and the district that I ran for and was elected to as a director of the NCAB was North and South Carolina.
Mm-hmm. That was the region for
right.
Yeah,
and I ran and was luckily accepted, and I stayed with the NAB for several years, and while there I was made chairman of the Small Market Committee, and we made sure that the small markets were not overlooked by all the powerhouses, the 50,000 watt stations, and we did a lot of things.
You did something very interesting that I saw. You would think that people on the FCC would be familiar with radio stations, and they'd visited radio stations, and you found out that that was quite different. You had many people there that had never been in a small market radio
Exactly
station.
right.
And what did you do?
We had junkets for the FCC and the personnel that were telling all the broadcasters what they should do and how to do it, but they had never been in a radio station.
Yeah.
So we put together a group of broadcasters that were interested in entertaining FCC people, and we took FCC people that were in all areas of the FCC to visit radio stations, and that was well received, and I think it did something for the industry because it seemed that they knew more what they were talking about when they were making the rules for the FCC after that.
Well, let's talk about that, because that was another item that you were very, very deeply involved in and a proponent for. You realized from being an owner of small market stations that the regulatory burden, it was real easy for the FCC to pass rules and regulations, which resulted in a lot of expense and paperwork that might be justified for a larger market station, but not necessarily for smaller market stations.
Exactly right.
You fought hard, and the first step was to get these commissioners and staff out to see small market operations to understand that the rules and the regulations that they were passing were not necessarily applicable. One size did not fit all.
Very well said.
You fought that fight.
Yeah, and we won.
And you won.
Yeah.
And that helped hundreds and thousands of small market operators not to have the burdens that they shouldn't have had in the first place. We're so glad that you did that. You also had an association. You became very influential at NAB, the National Association of Broadcasters. They put you on the convention committee.
Yeah.
You helped to design the convention. Talk a little bit about that.
Okay. It was just the same thing that we did at the NCAB, except on a very larger scale.
Yeah.
One thing that I did while I was at the NAB, after being at the NAB for a long time, for a short period of time, and the longer I was there, very few people knew that there was another association, another radio association. It was called the NAB was the National Association of Broadcasters, and the other one was the National Radio Broadcasters. It was two
groups,
two associations.
Yeah.
And they fought for membership.
Oh,
and,
you competed.
Right. And I suggested that we join forces and met with the people at both heads of the both groups,
Yeah.
and they did join together and became the NAB.
Wow.
The other one, just we absorbed them.
That what an accomplishment, because as far as Congress and the FCC, if you want to have impact, you need to speak with one voice.
That's exactly right.
Not with two.
That's exactly right.
And if you aren't both on the same page, really, you can't get the things done you need.
That's exactly why I suggested that we do that. And,
that is remarkable.
And we did it.
Well, while you were at NAB and owning radio stations with the Suburban Radio Group, you got interested in television. Talk a little bit about that.
The FCC had allocated several channels in North Carolina, as they did in other states, for television stations. Allocated one for Belmont, where we had a radio station,
Oh,
which is ZKY, no,
JZY.
JZY.
And Belmont, for people that don't know, is not that far. It's in the Charlotte area.
Right. It's right at the Charlotte airport.
Yeah. So it was in Charlotte. Today, what we would know as Charlotte.
Yeah, it's Charlotte.
But in those days, Belmont was a separate city and not part of the Charlotte Metro.
Right.
So in fact, you were getting an opportunity for JZY, Channel 46.
We put that on the air, and then we put another station on the air, a drop-in station, Channel 8, I believe it was.
And that's in the Greenville, New Bern, Washington television market in eastern North Carolina.
That was in Morehead City.
WFXI,
Right.
which now is the Fox affiliate
It was, yes.
in that market. And also another station in Greenville and another one in Jacksonville.
Yeah, we bought those permits, but we sold that property before building those two stations. So we sold that property, the Fox affiliate, Channel 8. When we sold that, we sold those CPs, and I think they're on the air now.
They are. And the other thing about WJZY, you eventually sold that to...
We sold that to Jim Goodman.
Yeah, at Capital Broadcasting in Raleigh.
Right.
And he owned that for many, many years. And then it recently became a Fox-owned and operated station.
Yes.
So quite an accomplishment. You got it on the air. Mr. Goodman operated it as a Fox affiliate for many years, and then primarily because Fox Network had a directive that they wanted to own stations where there were national football teams, the Carolina Panthers, and they bought that from Mr. Goodman and Capital Broadcasting.
And they took their affiliation away from Mr. Bahakel's station in town.
That's right.
And they became an independent station, and we became the Fox affiliate.
Wow. That's something. Well, you continued. You also bought, and perhaps you have now, Florence County Broadcasting Company.
Yeah, we that was, I told you at one time, we continued buying stations.
Mm-hmm.
And my partner, Bob Hilker, got ill, and he knew he was ill, and he had a meeting with me and our CPA, and he told me about his illness, and he said, we need to start liquidating our company. And that was a shock to me. And during the divvying up of all our properties, the ones that we still had, because we had sold a few, we sold our two TV stations and the radio stations. As he was divvying up the stations, he gave me the FMs, and he kept the AMs. And I said, Bob, are you sure you want to do this? He said, yes, our FMs are not located close by. The AMs are Belmont and Valdez, and I forget the other one. Anyway, it was 3 stations that he kept and gave me the FMs, and I operated it by myself for a couple of years, and then I sold it.
Wow. Well, that's pretty remarkable.
I've had a very interesting life, totally.
And NCAB, the North Carolina Association of Broadcasters, at several levels, because of all your involvement, and we need to mention that in the FCC staff tours that you arranged, over 400 FCC staff people, through the guidance and your suggestion and arranging tours at small broadcast stations, visited and had firsthand experiences with small market radio. That is remarkable.
Yeah, I didn't remember exactly
Over
how many.
400.
I didn't exactly remember how many, but yes, it was a large group.
I can't imagine any other person in the history of broadcasting who has gotten 400 people from the FCC to go anywhere, maybe but lunch, and let alone to experience firsthand what small market radio broadcasters were all about, because that changed their perspective when they were drafting rules.
It really did. It really did.
I saw you were director of the Carolina School of Broadcasting. Do you want to talk about that?
Yes, I was a director of the Carolina School of Broadcasting for a year or two, and one good thing I think it's still operating. In fact, we sold it. We sold it, not we. The owner sold it to two employees of our group. When we were selling out, they were looking for jobs, and they bought the Carolina School of Broadcasting, and they still operate it today.
And that was kind of your extension when you were at NCAB, which was, up until the time that you suggested differently, kind of a organization for managers and owners.
Right.
And at the conventions and different times during the year, one of the great benefits to stations is NCAB provides great educational seminars, and you took that to different levels within broadcast organizations.
Right. The Carolina School of Broadcasting, when people graduate from there, they go on to different jobs in broadcasting.
Yes.
Some become salespeople, some become announcers.
With training.
Right.
So you have someone that knows the dance.
And that's they have the stations call the Carolina School of Broadcasting and ask, do they have such and such available? And it's a source of people to work at radio stations and TV stations after they go to that school.
And Bill, NCAB has honored you at many different levels. We've already talked about the fact you were an NCAB president, but in 1986, you were presented the NCAB Distinguished Service Award.
Yeah, that's
for all the things that you had done. The Earl Gluck Award.
Right, yes.
Very prestigious, and a great reflection on not only your work for North Carolina broadcasters, but broadcasters throughout the country, through all the things you were doing at the National Association of Broadcasters. And then in 2001, really one of NCAB's highest honors, you were inducted into the NCAB Hall of Fame.
Yes, I was, and I appreciate that. I'm included in a group of men that have done a lot for broadcasting.
You certainly are, and that is not something that is given lightly, and it is a very exclusive group of people in recognition of all their efforts. Radio station owner, announcer, television owner. You serve the industry at levels. One of the comments that was made by your peers is that when you were president of NCAB, there was always something going on. You made that organization work for their members.
Well, I like to think I did.
Well, you most certainly did. What other thing stands out in your mind of all the things? Talk a little bit about your mentor, Bob, and how he meant so much to you. He really is a North Carolina broadcast legend. We regret he's not here today for us to interview him.
He would be the first person you would interview for this series if he was alive.
Tell us about him a little bit.
He was very active in organizing. He and Wade Hargrove and a couple other broadcasters got together and formed the NCAB. They were really the pioneers of getting it going, getting it started. But I told you about Bob telling me we were going to buy a station in St. Croix.
Yes.
And that shocked me. I said, okay. But I'll tell you an anecdote that we used that station for. We made we made an opportunity for our other staff, other managers, if they made their quota, they could go down there and take their entire family for a week's vacation.
Oh, wow.
But the manager had to work down there.
At the station.
Right.
Wow.
And while the family enjoyed the sun and fun, we sent letters to the wives and told them about the contest, which they would get their husbands out on the street early.
It was a motivating factor, wasn't it?
It really was.
Well, isn't that nice that you had a facility there and you used it as a motivation for other people within your group?
It really worked well for us.
Well, I think that is terrific. Well, you've done so much, and I think it goes back. We talk about the people that influenced you and the opportunities you've had, how important mentoring is to deal with other people in the business, to be encouraged, and to bring people along. And it appears to me that there haven't been very many people that have mentored others as well as you have, Bill Rollins.
Well,
And not only at the legislative process, but being very inclusionary.
I had a mentor, Bob. We talked about Bob Hilker. He was my mentor, my best friend, a surrogate father. He was when he made me president of the company, and he took off, and I didn't see him anymore. He and his wife traveled all the time when I was running the stations as president. But I had a great mentor, and I believe in the mentor process, and I've done that for some young people myself.
Well, your contributions are many, and the influence of all the things that you've done are broad across the entire industry. What's next for Bill Rollins?
I'm still working. I didn't want to be like my father. When my father retired, he went home and sat down, and we lost him 2 or 3 years later. You got to stay active when you leave broadcasting. I had when we divvied up our company, I had the FM stations, and I ran the Florence station for a long time, and I had a tower company. Bob Hilker was smart enough to know that we could sell our radio stations but keep the towers.
Yeah.
I thought that was quite unusual, but it's done today.
Great idea.
Yeah, that was one of his ideas.
Mm-hmm.
But I now I was in the coffee company. I owned the half of a coffee company in Costa Rica. I built houses in the Peninsula Country Club here at my house.
And that's at Lake Norman.
Yeah, and we're building houses now in Costa Rica.
Wow.
And I have some real estate, and I stay busy with that. I stay busy. I don't know what I do, but I stay busy.
Well, I think that's admirable, and it gives me great satisfaction and hope to see you do that. And I agree. I couldn't agree with you more. I think the people that do well stay active.
Yeah, you got to stay busy
and stay mentally engaged.
Yeah.
And clearly, I don't think we need to worry about you having much spare time, because you seem to be pretty engaged in a number of projects. And we appreciate you taking time to be with us today to share all these great stories. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us today?
I just appreciate being part of this illustrious group that you call the legends of North Carolina in broadcasting.
Well, you certainly are one. Thank you very much.
Thank you.